Caserta, the Neapolitan Versailles. It was started in like 1750-something by Charles VII of Naples, who then decided he'd better become Charles III of Spain, and so he left. The reason being that he was the son of Philip V of Spain. Basically, the guy who built this, his great-grandfather, maybe, Louis XIV, who built Versailles, he himself had grown up in the royal palace in Madrid because his father was Philip V. And so he'd grown up in Madrid in a new palace that had been built slightly emulating Versailles. And so obviously when he got to Naples and found that he was stuck in the royal palace in the middle of the city, not a nice place to be all the time, you slightly want to get out of town occasionally, in the summer perhaps. Obviously, Bourbon wants to build a Versailles. And so he got Luigi Vanvitelli to build this. I think it's the biggest palace in the world, and it is absolutely vast. And the sort of Baroque garden in front was not done, and also the kind of colonnades on the far side of the palace weren't done, but the rest of it was built. And it is just colossal and incredible, and go if you haven't been. And it's just endless colonnades and exaggerated, mad bits of architecture. And here's a sort of entrance to the palace bit facing the staircase is this huge copy of the Farnese Hercules. And they were kind of Farneses also because Philip V's queen was Elizabeth Farnese. And so the guy who built this palace started off as Duke of Parma and Piacenza. And so he brought the Farnese collections to Naples. This is on the ceiling there in that entrance in plasterwork, and it's absolutely staggeringly enormous. Look at the detail of it. It is the most beautiful bit of plasterwork anywhere, and it's on a scale not to be believed. And look at how lifelike and botanical all of those things are. And what the meaning is, I don't know. Is it the seasons? God knows. Or maybe it's something to do with their dominions. I have no idea. And then lots of shells, endless shells. And why endless shells? I don't know. Maybe it was one of their emblems. Anyone who's a fan of the Star Wars sagas will obviously recognize it as the palace of somebody in the Star Wars. And then obviously there are these lions just sort of casually strolling on the stairs, these enormous marble lions. And he's got a paw crushing a crown. What's going on there, I don't know. Maybe it's the crown of the predecessor, the previous dynasty who they got rid of. I don't know. And then lots of amazing marble reliefs on other sorts of marble. Marble. And then here up the top of the stairs, these incredible, enormous windows. I think this is the floor in the chapel. They're just so bold, that design, isn't it? It's fantastic. And then here an angel casually sort of lifting one wing to support the balcony in the chapel. But here's looking up in some enormous room. And there is this fantastic Empire furniture. Charles VII abdicated, and then his third son becomes Ferdinand IV, and who was married to Maria Carolina of Austria, who was the sister of Marie Antoinette. And then everything goes a bit wrong when Napoleon invaded there. Then Napoleon went off to Egypt, and so Ferdinand takes an army up to Rome to try and get rid of the French from Rome, whereupon Napoleon sends people back to retake Rome. And the Neapolitans have to run back to Naples, but sort of get there a bit late. And then I think Nelson appears, with an English fleet, and rescued them and took them off to Sicily, which was also theirs. And so they lived in Sicily for a bit. Then after the fall of the empire, they came back. But while they were away, there was first of all Joseph Bonaparte, Napoleon's brother, for a couple of years as king. And then Murat, Napoleon's favourite, his sort of best mate and his best marshal, who was married to his sister Caroline, and so they lived there. And so as a result of those people being there, there's all this Empire furniture, which is rather fantastic. But these rooms are decorated later. These are, I think, done in the 1840s or something. But they are just fantastic. And these wonderful, huge hunting pictures. And on the left there, we can barely see, but that is actually Napoleon's throne from the Tuileries or somewhere, some throne of Napoleon's, which I think he rejected. And so it was given to Joseph Bonaparte to bring here. And there's just a rather nice door. And there's some wonderful stools with Joseph Bonaparte's monogram on top. What about that marble work? I mean, that's 1840 or something. Love that huge Greek key. There's that whole line of stools. And then here, these amazing walls with this vast sort of plaster reliefs, and then a little bit of Sèvres, and that incredible floor. And then here, looking up at the ceiling, gilded lions on the door frame, and here another Victory on the facing wall. And it's fantastic to visit because there's nobody there at all. So you walk around these enormous rooms with the breeze blowing through, obviously, if you go in the summer. And I actually went there on my birthday a couple of years ago. Escaped from a holiday I was on and wasn't really loving, and went here on my birthday. I had such a lovely time wandering around those rooms. I imagine that's a stove with a board on it because it's not in use. And then on top of it, this gilded trio, and those floors are fantastic. And the wall is scagliola, I mean, I think the columns, probably the pilasters are marble, and then the actual wall is scagliola. And it has the most fantastic effect, this whole enormous surface of scagliola. Because scagliola, as I've explained before, is plaster mixed with colour and marble dust and things. And so it sort of seems a bit like marble, but it's this rather uneven surface, but very polished. It's a wonderful effect for huge gilded figures. And quite a lot of this decoration of these rooms was done for a terrible man called King Bomba. And he was known as King Bomba because, he had his artillery people bombard some sort of little rebellion that was going on. So he was known forevermore as King Bomba. Isn't that throne wonderful? And here just more gilded magnificence. A more fantastic floor. Love that. And that throne again. And then here another fireplace cover. This is a painted floor. And so they've also run out of funds here. And so there's a terracotta tiled floor, and they've gone and painted over it with this rather naive marbling, which gives a fantastic effect. And then here's some wonderful 1820s wallpaper, or stenciled border maybe. And then this piece of furniture, terribly elegant. And then when it's opened up, it reveals itself to be a wooden pipes, organ, pianola sort of thing. Lines of chairs. Fantastic. And then this is marvellous. This is a sort of fun fair, a kind of Disneyland done for the royal family, obviously. Neapolitan royal family, and they had a place called La Favorita, something like that, just near Herculaneum. One of the sons of the king made it into this sort of entertainment park. And all of these rides were actually worked by sailors. And so the sailors of the Neapolitan Navy were employed to go into, do you see the base of that sort of weird windmill thing in the middle that's got sort of ships hanging from arms? And so the members of the court and his friends would go and sit in the ships, obviously. And then the sailors would be inside sweating away, turning some enormous mechanism, running round and round, in order to entertain the courtiers. I mean, it's absolutely terrible. No wonder King Bomba had to bombard everybody. And I think these must be the original models that the architect made. And here's another one, you see, and you sit in the little car and you go swinging through the air, and presumably you can hear the grunts and swearing from the sailors inside the classically decorated little building where they're inside frantically running, turning a capstan or something. I think that is Murat and Caroline, his wife, in those portraits, and some bit of furniture from the time, I suppose. And then this is when I think King Bomba gave shelter to the Pope in 1848 or whatever. There were, one of those times when they were having lots of revolutions. And so there was a sort of revolution in Rome. And the Pope, of course, at the time was like the king of Rome, as it were. Rome was quite a large state. There was an uprising, and so the Pope had to flee. And so he fled to Naples, and King Bomba put him up at Caserta. And so this was the Pope's chapel while he was a refugee at Caserta. It is rather a beautiful room. And I suppose that is the Pope who took refuge there and used to presumably give mass every day in this tiny little chapel, probably just to King Bomba. I think maybe this is Murat's bedroom and all Murat's bedroom furniture. And look at that bed, isn't that fantastic? And it's marvellously tatty. The first time I went to see Caserta was about 20 years ago or something with my lovely first wife, and we went into one of these rooms and the attendant in the room was asleep on the bed. And we just heard, it was completely dark, there was no lights on at the time, which was fantastic. And we heard this snoring and then we looked, and the man was fast asleep on the bed. Anyway, here's a gilded griffin on a piece of furniture in there. And the interior of the bed, look at it, it's all held up by eagles, and then it's got sort of military heads on the bedposts. And the silk fabric is, I suppose, the original, and is all very, very tatty and falling to bits. It's the most charming place to see. The posts holding up the curtains, the spears, the whole thing's very military, obviously. And here's Murat's desk, and another of these wonderful painted floors. That's probably 1840 or something. And it's a very fine piece of Empire furniture, getting completely bleached by the sun. And then this is, I think, the King's bathroom. And unfortunately, they always keep closed the Queen's bathroom, which is unbelievably beautiful and fantastic. But the King's bathroom is pretty good. And what about that dressing table in white marble? That's not bad, is it? And there's the royal bathtub. And it says Caldo and Freddo on the taps. And then here another of these painted terracotta floors. And I love the scale of that design. And then that rather strange sort of lumpish sofa. Well, look at that tabletop, isn't that fantastic? And there's Pietrodura. Unbelievable work. Really beautiful. And then this big sort of tazza vase thing was a present from the Pope to say thank you for the hospitality of King Bomba. I think he told King Bomba that it was ancient Roman, but in fact it was brand new. But it's rather a magnificent thing. Back in those 18th century rooms, this is an artist called Hackett. All these sort of seaside scenes in the Kingdom of Naples, and some rather wonderful plaster work. And I love that little sofa. And so these are the only rooms surviving from the pre-Napoleonic time, I think. And this lovely, lovely room with these green lacquered walls and beautiful little scenes, again by Hackett. And really fantastic detail in these rooms, beautiful. And then this is just a bit of wallpaper border from sort of 1840, I suppose. And then this is in I think, Maria Carolina's library. And she was obviously trying to keep up with her sister Marie Antoinette, who had such wonderful rooms in France. Another bit of her library. And then here are two princes, and I don't know whose princes they are, but they look as if they're in about 1820 or something, don't they? I like their outfits. And one of the king's dogs. Wonderful dopey expression on its face. Anyway, now we must speed to the English garden. So there is the entire enormous, vast palace. And so you can see the size of the thing. Look at it. I mean, it's absolutely bonkers. But and then you see this enormous garden. And so what you do now, unless you're feeling very, very, very fit, you get in a bus at the back door of the palace and you drive in the bus all the way to the far, far, far distance, the top of this photograph, and you get out there, and there's a place where you can have an ice cream and a coffee and then go to see the English garden, which is incredibly beautiful. And so this is just a casual little sharply tapered pyramid in the English garden. And then this is a fat-bottomed angel on the fountain at the top of the great cascade. And in the very, very, very far distance, you can just make out the palace. And here's Diana and Actaeon on the waterfall. More of the same. And it's so beautiful, you know. But imagine how it was when it was all properly kept up. It must have been amazing. This is the bath of Venus. But just this beautiful sort of shady thing with water running. And then you suddenly see there she is, carved in marble, sitting on a mossy rock. I mean, it's completely nuts. And then you turn around from that and you see this funny sort of doorway in these apparently natural rocks, but you can clearly see that it's all been carved and then put together in masonry style, but it's all overgrown on top. There's all this sort of jungle growing on top. And then inside you can just see a sculpture tempting you in. And so you go in and find yourself in this, which is the crypto portico. And so this is designed by Carlo Vanvitelli in 1785. And so by this time, his dad, of course, is dead, exhausted from the effort of trying to build that enormous palace. And so his son, Carlo, has taken over. And at the same time as trying to finish the palace, is obviously trying to put together a decent garden for poor Maria Carolina, desperate to compete with Marie Antoinette, who's got all her Trianon and all her Rambouillet and all her different gardens. And so Maria Carolina, desperate to have a proper garden of her own. And so she gets Vanvitelli Jr. to build this crypto portico, and then has this gardener, Grefa, German, who had been trained at the Physic Garden in Chelsea. He and Vanvitelli together create this English garden. But anyway, so you go in there today, and it's as it was for her. This hasn't become ruined, it was built as a ruin. And so it's got these fantastic jagged holes in the roof with plants coming down from them. And it probably does look better today than it did then. I mean, it is unbelievable. And now, of course, I think the sculptures are probably fakes, but then they were great classical sculptures from the Farnese collection. I mean, it's like a complete dream. And it's so cool in there because you've got water outside, and so you get a soft breeze coming in across the water. But it is just absolutely magical.